What we are going to do in this last section is we're now going to finally apply factoring. Okay, so there's no new factoring. So we're going to practice it a little more, but we're going to use it as part of something. And so what we're going to do in section 5.5 is we are going to solve what's called a quadratic equation. Okay, again, if you've taken any algebra at all, you've probably seen this. Okay, so we are going to solve quadratic. I'll explain that word in a minute. Equations by factor. Again, I cannot emphasize how important it is to learn this well. I just got out of my college algebra class. I have them immediately before you all, and we have been factoring and solving quadratic equations for the last couple of weeks as part of bigger problems. Okay, so you will use this, I promise. Okay, so this is good to recognize and be able to learn. So first thing I have to tell you is what a quadratic equation is. Okay, a quadratic equation, the word quadratic means that the highest power is 2. It's called a degree 2 equation. Okay, it has the highest power of 2. Now, it'll be useful for us to know this for when we come back to the very last section. We come back and we solve quadratic equations again. Only then we learn how to solve any quadratic equation, not just ones that I can factor. And so the general form of a quadratic equation is this. And I'm going to use some letters, the standard letters. If you've seen this before, you saw it with the same letters. Okay, we've got the letter a in front of x squared. There's my highest power of 2. That's what makes this a quadratic equation. A just stands for any number. You can put any integer, any value, any decimal there you want. Plus bx. So that has a power of 1. So my x squared term is still the highest power. Plus c, which is just, again, any number. And it's equal to 0. So that is the general form of any quadratic equation. So before we actually solve one, I've got a question for you. This is the key moment. This is the only bit of new information in this section. So here we go. If I tell you the following, I'm going to give you some information and then you are going to propose a conclusion for me. If I tell you that 2 numbers multiplied together, I'm not telling you what the numbers are. Okay, I'm telling you 2 numbers. You don't know what they are, but what I will tell you is that when I multiply them, I get 0. If a times b is 0, then what has to be true about one of the numbers? Yeah, because what's the only way to get 0 when you multiply? You multiply by 0. Okay, so if I tell you that I've multiplied 2 unknown numbers together and I get 0, then what you know is that either A is equal to 0 or B has to be equal to 0. They both cannot be non-zero. One of them has to be 0. Our book gives this the title, the Principle of Zero Products. I just call this the principle of common sense because 0 is my favorite number to multiply by, because 0 times anything gives you 0. Okay, so even though this looks like it doesn't really make any difference, what this does is it allows us to solve quadratic equations. So for instance, here's my first example. My first example is this. Let's say I have this. 3x minus 4, that's in parentheses. And then x plus 8, that's in parentheses, equals 0. I'm going to give you a moment to write that down. So what I'm showing you here is something that has already been factored for you. Somebody did that work. So I have something factored, meaning these 2 things are being multiplied together and it's equal to 0. So by the principle of zero products, by the common sense up there, what we can say is this. Since this times this. I don't know what this is. I don't know what that is. But I do know when I multiply them together, I get 0. Then here's the conclusion that you can make. Then either this first thing, 3x minus 4, either that has to equal 0, meaning I would have 0 times some number equals 0, or the x plus 8 would have to be 0, meaning I'd have a 0 here times whatever this number would be, because 0 times anything would be 0. Those are the two options. That's what this little blurb here allows me to do. So this first thing, okay, well, if that's true, if 3x minus 4 is 0, what's the value of x? Well, we'll add 4. This goes back to the first day we met each other, where we solved equations. Okay, so we've been solving equations all semester. We divide both sides by 3. The first solution here would be 4/3. Because when I plug 4/3 in here, that makes this first thing 0. 0 times whatever that would be is 0. Or here, x plus 8 is 0, so I subtract 8, and I get x is -8. And this one's a little easier to see because it's not a fraction. If I put -8 into this, -8 plus 8 is 0. That makes this thing here 0. Doesn't matter what this is. 0 times anything is going to give me 0. Those are my two solutions. And the last thing I'm going to ask you to do, this is a notational step. You're going to write a solution set. So you're going to write -8 is my first answer, comma, 4/3. I'm using braces. These are not parentheses. Remember, parentheses mean interval notation. These are not squared off brackets. Squared off brackets mean interval notation. These are braces. That means it's a list. And these are the only two answers. Okay, so there's our first problem, just practicing the principle of zero products there, that fancy sounding thing. So here's one for you. What are the solutions to this? X minus 5 times 4x plus 7 equals 0. Already factored. You just now need to tell me what the two solutions are. All right, the principle of zero products. So this is already equal to 0. These are already being multiplied together. So we're just practicing. This is the last step of every problem we're going to do after this. So what you're going to do is we're going to take the first factor, x minus 5 equals 0. Or the other possibility is that 4x plus 7 would equal 0. One of those two things has to be true. If it's x minus 5, then when I add 5 to both sides, my first solution is x equals 5. Well, again, let's look at that. 5 minus 5 would be 0 times 4 times 5 is 20 plus 7 is 27. 0 times 27 is 0. That's what we've done there. Okay, this principle of zero products. The second one, well, the second one's a little harder to see because it's going to be a fraction, but it's the same thing. I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. You get 4x equals -7. I'm going to divide by 4. And get x is equal to -7/4. There's my two solutions. If you can understand this bit, and then you can factor like we just did, you know everything you need to know. There's nothing else new in this section. Okay, so here's my solution set, -7/4 and 5. There we are. All right, here's my last example, and then we're just going to spend the rest of our time today working examples that allow us to practice factoring and solving and everything and get you ready for this test that you've got coming up on Monday. So here's mine. X squared plus 5x minus 24 equals 0. I'm giving you a minute to write this down. You don't have to do this on your own, although you can if you want to. You probably have seen this before at some point. So this is just a trinomial. In fact, this is the simpler situation. Remember, simple doesn't mean easy. It's the simpler situation where I have a 1 in front of the x squared. So this is just unfoiling. So I am going to, here's my parentheses, equal to 0, has to be equal to 0. If there's, we'll talk about, hey, Prickster, what happens if there's a number over there? We'll talk about what you do in that situation. Okay, so I'm just going to make a little note. This has to equal 0. Oops, I don't know what I'm spelling there. I need a vowel. Can't do this problem if it's equal to anything else. Now, well, you can do it, but you can't do it this way. You got a step before. All right, so here we go. X squared is x and x. My signs, since this is a -24, my signs are a plus and a minus, or a minus and a plus. The order doesn't matter. In fact, I think we've done this one when we factored, when we went through that section. The two factors of 24 that are going to be 5 apart are going to be 8 and 3. And I made the 8 positive because it should be a +5. So now I've got a first unknown factor times a second unknown factor, and that's equal to 0. So I can apply the aforementioned principle of zero products. My first one, I subtract 8. My second one, I add 3. And there's my two solutions. And now, just for time's sake, I'm not going to do this for all of them, but you can definitely check your answer. I take the number 3. What's 3 squared? What's 3 times 3? 9. What's 5 times 3? And then you take out your calculator. 9 plus 15 is 24. Minus 24 more is 0. Oh, there we go. The numbers work out. And the same thing would be true of -8. It's going to work. So you can check your answers. You can leave the test. You can leave your homework. You can leave your quiz knowing that you got a problem right just by real quick checking the values and throwing them in. Your problems, we're not going to end up with anything that's a decimal. Here, you might have an occasional fraction, but I don't emphasize those because I'm trying to get you up to speed solving things. Okay, so might be the occasional fractional answer because they're legal, there's nothing wrong with it, but I'm trying to help build your confidence in this. Here's your first one. X squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. Solve that, please. Okay, so factoring part is what we've already done. So x squared is x times x. My signs, since this is a -6, my signs are plus and minus. And then what are the two factors of 6 that are 1 apart? 2 and 3. I'm going to put the 3 positive. No, I'm not. I'm about to get a problem wrong. So I'm going to correct that. I'm going to make the 2 positive and the 3 negative because it needs to add up to a -1. That's the factoring. That's what we've already been doing and practicing. Hopefully you're caught up on My Math Lab with your quizzes and you're feeling good about it. If not, you've got a nice full 5 days until we see each other. So you'll have time to practice. And here are my 2 solutions. Again, you can check those values and plug them in. They're going to work just fine. There are my answers. Here is my next one. X squared plus 21 is equal to 10x. So write that down, and then you are going to propose a first step, and then I'm going to let you work the problem. Is this one equal to 0? No. So what's my first step? What do I have to do here first? Well said. I've got to subtract the 10x from both sides. I have to bring it over to the left with the other terms. Now, here's my last question on this, because I don't want you to make a silly mistake and do the wrong thing. When I subtract the 10x from both sides, to match my structure, where am I going to put the 10x when I put it over here? In the middle. Yeah, this is called, in case you haven't heard this before, this is called descending order. You put the powers in descending order. Power of 2, power of 1, no variable at all. So descending order, that's what you want to do. So you're going to subtract the 10x. You're going to put the 10x in the middle between those 2 terms, because that's what makes descending order. Then you're going to solve. Then you're going to factor. Then you're going to solve the problem. So give that one a try, please. Okay, so what I've done is, what I was told is we've got to have this equal to 0. That is not optional. Any problem that you encounter that is equal to something else, you have to get everything on the same side. And then you always want your trinomial to be in descending order so that you know what's your first, what's your last as you're factoring. That affects things. So here we go. My x squared is x and x. My signs are both positive, or excuse me, my signs have to be the same, and so they both have to be negative. And then the 2 factors of 21 that are going to add up to 10 are 7 and 3. So that means that I'm going to solve these 2 smaller little equations. So x minus 7, when I add the 7 to both sides, I get 7 as my first answer. X minus 3, when I add 3 to both sides, I get 3 as my second. You are welcome to check those, use your calculator. They're going to work out just fine. 3 and 7 are the answers to that problem. I just have a few more problems. I'm just giving you the different looks of things you're going to see when you do your homework. So when you have a question, ask it. Yes. Okay, in the braces, it does not. It does not. Now, I'll give you this advice. Okay, I won't mark it wrong. I won't mark that wrong for the braces. In interval notation, it would be wrong. Order matters, but for a set, it doesn't matter. But it's handy because when you have to do things with sets, it helps you see what the elements are. It's easier to work with when they are in order. So if any of you do happen to be taking MGF 1106 after this, we do talk about sets and working with sets and operations with them. It's a lot of fun, and that's some advice that I give in that class right there. All right, here's your next one. Okay, just another problem. It's the same stuff. You're factoring, you're setting your factors equal to 0 and solving. So x squared minus 49. Okay, so this is a different squares. X squared is x and x. 49 is 7 and 7 plus 1 minus the other. So then I've got my two factors equal to 0. So I take the first factor equal to 0. I take the second factor equal to 0. I'm hoping that you can see that it's the same process every time. Once you get used to it, you're doing the same exact things, just with different numbers every single time. So the more of these you do, the better you'll remember it when the stress of the test comes around. There's my two answers, -7 and +7. Here's another one. Be careful on this one. This is a one that students commonly make a mistake on. So I'm gonna give you the opportunity, and then we'll see. So 3x squared plus 12x equals 0. And the hint I'm going to give you is remember the factoring list that I just gave you in that brief video of section 5.4. Okay, what is the first thing you should always do when factoring? Okay, so from my little hint, what's the first thing on that factoring list, if you turn back in your notes, that we always look for? Common factor. This is not a trinomial. Okay, so I understand if you did this. Okay, I always get a significant number of students that work a problem like this. This is not right though. So if you saw this and you saw the square, you said, okay, I'm gonna do this. That's wrong because this only has two terms. It's not a trinomial. Okay, so on that list, when something is not a trinomial, that's not how we approach it. So first thing is, what's the common factor? Well, between 3 and 12, I can factor out 3. Between x squared and x, I can factor out an x. 3x squared divided by 3x leaves x. 12x divided by 3, 12 divided by 3 is 4. I had an x, I factored out an x, no more x. There's my two factors on this problem. Okay, so I'm going to take both these factors. I know this one looks a little different. Again, we're learning, but you do the same thing with it that we did before. I'm going to take 3x, that equals 0. I'm going to take 2x plus 4, that equals 0. Well, if I have 3 times x equals 0, the way to move the 3 here is by dividing. The reverse of multiplying by 3 is dividing by 3. And in your calculator, 0 divided by 3, if you have $0 and you want to give 3 friends an equal amount, you're going to give them each 0. 0 is a legal answer, it's good. The second one's -4, and there's your 2 answers to this problem. I gave that one just with the intention of you seeing that sometimes you don't have to unfoil, sometimes you're going to factor out a common factor. So if you struggled with that one, put a little asterisk by it. You're going to see that on the homework. There'll be one like that on the test, I promise. So, you can know that. All right, here's the next one. I'm going to give you a little more time on this one because this is not one that you're going to just do the unfoiling. You're going to use the grouping method because there's going to be a number in front of the x squared. So give this your best shot. 2x squared minus 11x plus 5 equals 0. So this one, you're going to have to use the grouping method because there's 2 in front of the x squared. So I'm going to get started on this. If you're still working, keep working. But the AC method said we've got to do this. We've got to take, because of this number in front of the x squared, I have to take that into account now. So I take the 2 times the 5. 2 times 5 is 10. Now I ask myself the same question that we were asking. What are the factors of 10 that are going to add up to a negative 11? And those factors are going to be what? Negative 1, negative 10. Sure. They both have to be negative for the same reason we talked about with the unfoiling problems. This last number is positive. That's where I get my lasts. And since it's positive, that means the signs have to be the same. Either both positive or both negative. This tells me both negative. So negative 1 times negative 10 gives me positive 10. Negative 1 plus negative 10 gives me the negative 11. Now, while we factor this, I'm just going to leave off the equal to 0. We'll attach it back on after it's been factored. So remember, the AC method says take the 2x squared minus 1x minus 10x plus 5. To refresh your memory, I'm now just taken this middle term and I've split it up into 2 terms. I'm now going to factor by grouping. That's the whole idea behind the AC method. So on the first 2 terms, I'm going to factor out an x. And when I factor out an x, I have 2x squared divided by x is 2x. Negative 1x divided by x is negative 1. I notice that my signs are the exact reverse of what I need. I have a positive x term and a negative number. Here I have a negative x term and a positive number, so I have to factor out a negative. And then between 10 and 5, they have 5 in common. So negative 10 divided by negative 5 is positive 2x. 5 divided by negative 5 is negative 1. The grouping has worked. So I'm going to factor out the 2x minus 1. I've got an x left from the first, a minus 5. All of this we have done many times. So if you haven't gotten to the homework yet, practice that. That is just our factoring by the AC method. And then the equal to 0 now, this is the problem I'm doing. So I'm going to put the equal to 0 on right there. We'll do another one. I think I've got 3 more problems that we are going to do. 2 or 3, just depending on time. So the third problem, the very last problem, will be another one that we have to factor with a number in front of the x squared just to practice. So now I take the 2 factors. Here I add 1 to both sides and I get 2x is equal to 1. I divide by 2 and I get x is a half. Here I add the 5 to both sides and I get x is equal to 5. So there are my 2 solutions, a half and 5. All right, we've got about 12 minutes left in our class time, so we'll see. I've got 3 problems that I'd like to get to. Here's the first one, x squared plus something, plus 5x is equal to 50. What's the first thing you have to do on this problem? Yep, got to bring that 50 over. Now the 50 does not have an x attached to it, so when I bring the 50 over, I'm just going to put it at the end. My descending order. Power 2, power 1, no power. Now I will factor. Let's get to here. It's the same steps every time. My signs have to be a positive and a negative. The two factors of 50 that are going to be 5 apart are positive 10 and negative 5. Take your two factors. You're going to set them both individually equal to 0. And this gives you your two solutions to the quadratic equation. Almost all the quadratic equations you solve by factoring will have two solutions. On occasion, you might encounter one that has one solution, okay, but you will always end up with something. All right, second to last problem. Once you write that down, I'll give you a suggestion. This is another situation, it's just a different look to something you might see. It's another situation where it's not equal to 0. So please do not say, oh, okay, x plus 8 is 0, x minus 2 is 0. This is not a 0. So this one involves a little busy work. Sorry about that, but I didn't want you just to encounter this cold on the homework. What you're going to need to do is you have to bring the 21 over. But before you can bring the 21 over, this is not ready to receive the 21. There's no like terms. So what you have to do first, okay, first thing you have to do is you have to FOIL this side out. You got to multiply that together. Then you can bring the 21 over. Then it's just like the problem we did a moment ago. All right, so I'm going to get started with this just because I want to leave enough time to practice factoring one more time, because that's going to be something on the test. So here we go. I FOIL. My firsts give me x squared. My outers give me negative 2x. My inners give me plus 8x. My lasts are minus 16. I'm going to do two things at the same time in this next step. I'm going to collect those like terms. I'm also going to bring the 21 over like we mentioned. So I'm going to add the 21. It's going to go right here with the 16. So here's what I have. X squared, negative 2x plus 8x is plus 6x. Negative 16 plus 21 is plus 5. X squared is x and x. My signs are going to be the same. They're both going to be positive. And the two factors of 5 to add up to 6. In fact, the only two factors of 5 are 5 and 9. Solve these two cute little equations. And there we go. All right, we got just enough time. Got 8 minutes left. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time. Focus on the factoring here. Here's the problem. 6x squared minus 19x minus 7 equals 0. It is factorable. You can use the AC method. Good luck. Trying to figure out factors. Remember, if you don't know where to start with 42, 42 is even, start with 2. It'll break it down into smaller numbers. Use your calculator. 42 divided by 2 is what? And then check those factors. If they work, great. If they don't work, then 21 is a little bit smaller of a number. You can see factors of 21. Okay, I'm just going to start for time's sake. I'm sorry if you're not done. I'm not meaning to make you feel rushed or anything like that, but I do like to let you out on time, so we've got just a couple more minutes. So my first times my last, my 6 times my -7 gives me -42. From here, to use the AC method, I ask myself the same question as for the unfoiling, is what 2 factors of -42 are going to add up to -19? So first thing I notice is that since it's a -42, I need a positive and a negative value. And then the second thing I notice is, I mean, if 42 is 7 times 6, but that doesn't work. But then 6, you can divide 3 or you can divide 2 into it. So you try 3 and 2 and 42. Well, it turns out 2 and 21 are 19 apart. That's why I picked those. So then the AC method says I'm going to use these 2 numbers as coefficients, and I'm going to split that middle term into 2 terms so that I can use grouping. Now in the grouping step, I'm going to factor out a 2x from the first 2. 6x squared divided by 2x is 3x. 2x divided by 2x is +1. Both the last terms are negative, so I'm going to factor that negative out. And then 21 and 7 have a 7 in common. A -21 divided by a -7 makes a +3. And then a -7 divided by a -7 is +1. The grouping worked, which I hope you trusted me. I told you it would factor. So I'm going to factor that out, and then I have a 2x minus 7 left. I'm going to bring my equal to 0 down at this point. And now what I do is I take each of these two factors equal to 0. Here I subtract 1, divide by 3. A lot of busy work on this problem. This is probably the hardest problem we've done all day. Okay, so if you're not quite there, that's okay. Do your homework, you'll get here. Okay, if you're there, that's great. Okay, that just means that you've been working and you're all set. It's good news. There's my second solution. So my solution set is -1/3 and 7/2. All right, you have a test on Monday. Be well over the weekend. Be prepared.